On today's trip to an undisclosed location, we had 7 cars with us, which is a large number of vehicles, especially if you drive technical obstacles. On today's trip we have Kurt, Adrian, Defender Steve, Jeep Steve, Vicky, Falk, Dave and myself with John riding shotgun with me. After the recent rain, the tracks were not wet but pretty moist, so traction really was at a premium. Curdy started the trip with the hardest track of the day, which you usually leave to the middle or so to allow the ground to dry up a little bit. And that is the step. This early in the day, with the ground still moist, it would be a hard task to get up that track. However, Adrian decided to give it a go. Adrian does not have the approach angle to get the front wheel on the rock, and because there's that big rock to the left hand side, it really needs a different approach where he comes far more from the right and tries to tackle that step in an angle. Now the front is positioned quite well, but his passenger rear is caught up on that big rock which has an undercut, and in that moist conditions there is just no traction. The idea here is to clear that big rock on the left with his passenger rear wheel. With his wheelbase and the moist conditions and very little traction, that proves to be very difficult. The plan now is to go back and realign and start up on the far right, and hopefully that should get the rear wheel around that big rock. Here you see quite well that big undercut I was mentioning before. Adrian caught his attempt off, and we thought we're gonna give Steve in the short wheelbase a go and see whether he can get around that rock. So Steve is giving it a go now with the long wheelbase, and wet weather just couldn't get a good angle there. We'll see whether... Nice. You just watch it, he's just gonna drive it. Yeah.
Front locker in yet? Just turn and then put it in. Is the back gonna be? Slow back because you don't want to fall on that back corner. It'll pop up though.
Just watch your leg there, Steve. Front lock on. Yep. That's it. Steve's sitting on the frame here, and when he reverses back, he would reverse with his rear tire in that big rock under him. So Steve is going to remove that rock.
Slow back. I'm pointed at the right line, am I? Yeah. We'll get you to turn the steering wheel in a minute.
And any last words, Steve? Because
the beautiful Lamborghini orange paintwork.
Yes, but it's probably only going to be the left side though.
Oh yeah, well, it only costs half as much to get it touched up.
Exactly.
Funniest thing is this is my daily driver.
Is it? Let's see how long that is going to prevail.
Alright, here's the push. Alright. Yeah, this way. Yeah, go on. I'm losing my nerve. Then turn to the right. This way. Turn this way and it comes up. Alright. Ready? Alright.
Beautiful! Right hand down.
Drive it. One motion.
Nearly! Given that we spent over 1 hour for 2 vehicle attempts on that obstacle, we decided after Steve's go here that the rest would give it a miss today. E-locker, E-locker. Because Steve had a previous attempt and already reversed back, the e-locker did not re-engage. This is an unfortunate design feature of the Harrop Eaton e-locker. This is not a showstopper, it just means that you have to have a few attempts, reverse back and try to make the locker work when you need it, especially on rock steps like this. You see quite well that both lockers are engaged while Steve is going forward here. However, when he stops and reverses a tiny little bit, the e-locker in the rear disengages and does not quick enough re-engage. With rock steps like this, you often need that locker working and in that particular second. You need to give it enough room to have that locker on when you hit that step. Yes. Oi! Next is Curdy's turn. He also has a front and rear Harrop Eaton e-locker, and we again see here how it disengages after reversing back and then does not re-engage at the correct time.
One motion. That's right. That's it.
They're bay tight. Will it crawl from there or not?
No, I think he'll spit rocks out. He needs that little bit of...
Oh, he's off the rocks. Rear locker! Rear locker! Now it is.
I think you'll have to roll back and have another stab.
Right you are.
It's just pushing the start off that lead.
I run a front and rear AirB air locker, which within the first 6 months both leaked. However, John from JMac fixed them and that was all under warranty. Here I initially forgot to engage my front and rear locker, but that was remedied quickly. Today I did run 10 psi front and rear, but to be honest I probably could have gone down to 8 or 7 because it was fairly slippery. There are a few things to consider on that obstacle. You need to keep far to the left, however you have that tree there, so you've got to be careful, especially if you have rear panels, that you don't bounce into that tree. However, in front of you, within 2 or 3 meters, you also have that rock shelf, which you can't really climb. So you need just enough momentum to get you up that step, but not enough to drive you into that rocks in front of you. Without much traction and with a moist ground, it wasn't really an easy task. This was my second trip with the new Ruby transfer case installed. Thanks Phil. And together with the iDrive, I have to say it made a huge difference in regards to drivability. Once you manage to get the rear wheels up, you need to shovel fore and backwards to make it around that rock to the left. Next it was Vicky's turn in the short wheelbase JK.
Okay, rub it.
Go back, get a little bump. So you just got to drive up to the rock and stop. And then we'll back and fill. No, get that undercut. You're going to have to go back. Just try it again, but stop. Can you just bump it from there again? Maybe try a touch more this way, and if it doesn't come up because of that, we'll just put a rock under it. So a little bit of this lock, we'll try this time. Just same again, go.
Vicky was still on 15 psi, so we lowered that down to 12 and also did a little bit more of rock packing.
Maybe.
Look at that! Is that the tire pressure or the building?
Now back this way. There you go.
Good. Next in line was Falk with his TD5 Defender 110. That's it.
Yeah, almost.
Oh, you were pretty much up if you wouldn't have backed off.
So it's operator error.
Yeah.
Oh, like that. Nearly. You tell me.
So tire pressure down from 16 to 12. Yeah,
Go.
that's it. And once more you see what a difference tire pressure makes. From 16 psi down to 12, and Falk drove it fairly easily. Dave saw everyone struggling and adjusted the tire pressure before he started the drive and then made it look super easy. Adrian in the light and long wheelbase Hilux makes it look easy again. The next obstacle was a double step, but after the reasonable size first step you have a kind of a gap which goes lower down, so ramp over angle again will play a big role. Sitting on the slider.
Yeah, a little bit that way and trip up it a little. Right. Just up it a little. Go back. You're missing the rocks. Then a little, go. Yeah, drop. Get into that rock. Right back a little bit, then turn up again. All right. Drop it a little. Yeah, go back. Stand back, Mr. Rock.
It is quite interesting to watch how the rear wheel stops intermittently, even though the throttle is still on. I don't know why yours is so different. But
Yeah.
that's it!
In the beginning, too.
JK Steve decided to take a different line to the left in his short wheelbase JK. At the first glance it looked like the easier line with a fairly straightforward drive up, however that proved not to be due to the ramp over angle. Not being able to clear the frame of the vehicle, Steve needed to shuffle over to the left as close as possible to the tree to get up the step without getting hung up on the frame.
Nice!
Yeah. Next it was Falk's turn in the TD5 Defender 110. He has the older style ARB air locker front and rear. I unfortunately then missed him driving it because I moved the camera to have a look at Vicky in the short wheelbase trying the same line Steve did. She ran into the same issue as Steve, so she needed to shuffle further to the left as close as possible to the tree to make sure that the frame cleared, and with a few rocks then she managed to drive up there. On the main step it was Dave's turn with his JK CRD manual on 37s.
Nice!
That was the third obstacle cleared and we were off to the next one. At our lunch break, Falk discovered that his brakes were a bit doughy and that he had no brake fluid left. So he missed out on that big step. Without brakes wouldn't be that advisable. Steve, in all of his excitement trying to be the first driving down the big step, managed to get himself wedged on a big rock he didn't see when driving forward.
Oh, no. I was so excited about the bloody ledge. I didn't even look where I was driving.
In the meantime, Curdy was first to drive down this monster step. It becomes quite interesting because your front left drops in and your rear right is still on a ledge, so you have a bit of a side angle. Not too crazy, but in the vehicle, seeing that big drop in front of you, it looks pretty scary.
Yeah, you can't go any further down. All right, come on in. Yeah, all right. All right, ready?
Driving big steps like this, the idea is to keep the wheels rolling and not brake and lock the wheels up. Under extreme angles that could catapult you forward and you also lose control of steering. So the idea is to just feather the brakes so that your wheels keep rolling forward. I reckon Steve earned the record for the slowest drive down there. I had to speed it up 400%, otherwise we would be still sitting here tomorrow. However, easing the rear down slowly, especially if you have these corners as the 110 has, is advisable because his corner just touched the rock, so if he would have just let it roll down fast, he would have done his corners in. Of course, in a short wheelbase, that big step is even scarier because your angle will be much steeper. That means it is even more important to keep the wheels rolling, especially when the front comes down, and avoid any sudden braking, as that could flip the car over in a worst case scenario. Vicky demonstrates brilliantly here though how it's done.
Vicky, how does it feel?
as close to death as possible.
You alright?
Freaking Hiluxes. That's it.
A little bit left hand down at the front. Is your rear locker on? Yeah, you're right. Good line there. Steady. Steady. Yeah, right. Steady, steady, steady. You begin. Yeah. Thank you. Done, mate.
The track is blocked at the end by a big tree, so you have to turn around and then you pretty much have 3 ways to go up. This section really requires a good ramp over angle and doesn't really favor wide vehicles. You can see here that Kurt's e-locker is again not engaging after reversing.
Rear locker is not on.
If you have an e-locker and do technical driving like this, one thing you can do to reduce the re-engagement time is to disengage the e-locker before reversing backwards and then flick it back on when you go forward again. These should theoretically halve the time it takes to engage.
Wait.
Steve's passenger John used the time for a little afternoon nap in the sun.
Winch. The other way. Gertie.
Ready that way?
Stop. Don't go back anymore. Full lock this way. First gear, go.
Yes. Yes.
Out your way.
Alright, keep going. Keep going. Keep going.
While the e-locker may be alright for standard off-road driving if you're just on some fire trails or want to get out of a mud puddle, we saw so many times
Rear
here
locker.
that it's really not suitable for technical driving because you just cannot time that locker correctly, especially if you reverse forward and backward, to work at that instance where you need it. And if it does not work that 1 second, you see it just stops that drive. The ramp over angle and car width is really the most important on this obstacle. If you can't clear that rock with your frame or straddle to the left and right because your car is too wide, you have little chance on this track. Next it was my turn. The track is very deceiving. You see that second little rock step on the left, and that really unfortunately pushes your rear over and then you sit with your diff on that big rock to the right. Yeah, right here I'm being pushed over and now sitting on the diff as Curdy said before. I just got my new warn winch installed, so it provided a good opportunity to test the warn winch and the new remote which I recently installed. My ramp over angle once more became my downfall. I tried to drive the far left line, but got pushed over and then sat with my frame and later with my shock mount on the rock, so needed to winch over that again. So far I really have 2 negatives for the Jeep JK, and that is the absolute abysmal ramp over angle due to the low-hanging crossmember and fuel tank, and the pretty weak steering box, and there seems to be no upgrade option available for right-hand drive. Steve, seeing all the issues we had, he decided to take a different sidetrack, which looked drivable, so we were keen to see how Steve would go. The difficulties with that track was that there was a very sharp drop-off and it was fairly narrow. Steve's passenger wheel probably had 30 centimeters and then the rock just dropped away, so definitely something he would not want to drop into. Nice.
Gently, man. Easy. Easy.
Don't drive in that camera.
Yeah. Scroll it? Yeah, it's just going to come up that lip. Gentle, 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 gentle. You alright? Easy done, mate. Thank you.
Good. Next it was Defender Steve's turn on the same track we did. He actually learned from our mistakes and drove that first step with a bit more gusto and managed to get up there. And now he was on the second step where he tried to drive the far left, what I tried before as well, but he got also pushed over and sat then on his frame. He only needed a little winch though for that last little bit.
A little bit, not too much.
That's it. Don't let that bar end on your foot. Yeah, that's until it moves him over. So, well, there's carnage going on to my right. There's carnage just to start on my left. Vicky. So we had two vehicles now driving a track at the same time. But before we get back to Vicky, let's see how Steve did here and then Adrian. I think we finally caught on how Adrian operates. He wasn't seen during any of the other cars driving up, so he relaxes in the back, has a little nap, and lets us do all the rock packing. And then he comes up last and just drives it easily with that super capable Hilux. We got you, Adrian.
What? The more he comes this way, the more he gets me. No, that's perfect. Okay, that's you can probably go left hand down. I can probably get a bit more square onto it.
Dave, having seen all the commotion going on the two other lines, decided to go the way back up we went down, these big massive steps. While the winch was ready to go, he thought he'd give it one go driving. Even if his rear wheel would have started climbing, the front left would have had to climb a step as well. On this step, wheelbase and ramp over angle was not in Dave's favor. Out came the one winch for Dave and a quick winch, and that was sorted. This is the end of another great trip. Thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like, subscribe and share if you enjoy my videos. My channel is completely self-funded. If you can afford it, please consider joining me on Patreon and becoming one of my Patreon supporters.